The Sound of Crickets by Janson Davies. Chapter 1. The Invitation. Note: the aliens did their homework. From observing Earth sports, they learned that the bat and ball game of cricket had 2.5 billion fans and over 30 million registered players worldwide. On Earth, the final ball had been bowled. England had clinched the World Cup in a nail-biting finish at Lord's, and the Oval was still reverberating with chants, camera flashes, and the metallic thrum of celebratory fireworks. Captain Thomas Mann stood at the center of the pitch, his whites streaked with turf and adrenaline, the trophy heavy in his hands. Around him, the team, veterans and newcomers alike, basked in the moment. Coach Linda Ryan was already fielding questions from broadcasters, her voice clipped and proud. Then the sky shifted. Above the stadium, the clouds parted unnaturally, revealing a geometric shimmer, like a prism folding in on itself. The floodlights dimmed, phones lost signal. The crowd fell silent, not in fear, but in collective bewilderment. Thomas turned toward the pavilion. His teammates were gone. No sound, no flash, just absence. They awoke in a chamber that felt like a cathedral carved from basalt. The walls were etched with angular patterns that pulsed faintly, like veins of light beneath stone. The air was breathable, though tinged with something metallic. Gravity held, but unevenly, enough to make walking feel like drifting through a dream. The beings who greeted them were tall, robed, and solemn. Their faces were humanoid but stylized, as if sculpted by tradition rather than biology. Their skin bore the texture of polished clay, and their eyes were deep-set, unreadable. They wore ceremonial sashes and carried staffs inscribed with symbols that glowed faintly in the dim light. One stepped forward. His voice was low and resonant, translated instantly into English by a device embedded in the wall. "You are honored guests, chosen for your mastery of the Earth ritual known as cricket." Coach Ryan blinked. "You mean the sport?" The alien paused. "We understand it as more than sport. It is a rite of balance, endurance, and precision. We have studied your broadcasts. We wish to learn." Thomas stepped forward. "Where are we?" The alien gestured toward a translucent panel. Beyond it, a vast city stretched across a copper-hued landscape, spires of stone, bridges of light, and a sky with 3 moons. "You are on Jalrex, our home. You will be treated with respect." The days that followed were structured and formal. The team was given quarters, minimalist but elegant, with soft lighting and panoramic views of the alien skyline. Meals were tailored to their biology, though the textures were unfamiliar. Communication was facilitated by neural translators embedded in the walls. They were not prisoners, but they were not free either. Each morning they were escorted to a training field, a replica of a cricket pitch, meticulously constructed but subtly wrong. The dimensions were off by 1 inch, the turf was synthetic, the stumps were carved from translucent crystal. Their hosts observed in silence, recording every movement. They asked questions about technique, strategy, etiquette. They were fascinated by the concept of tea breaks. Thomas tried to explain the spirit of the game. It's not just rules. It's rhythm. It's history. You can't learn cricket from diagrams. The alien nodded. "Then teach us the rhythm." At night, Thomas sat by the window, watching the moons rise. He thought of home, of the noise, the banter, the quiet tension of a drawn test match. Here, everything was quiet, controlled. He didn't know if they'd been abducted or invited. He didn't know what the aliens truly wanted. But he knew one thing. If they were going to teach cricket to another world, they'd have to start with the sound of it. The sound of crickets. Chapter 2. The Pitch. The training field was immaculate, symmetrical, polished, and eerily quiet. It resembled a cricket pitch in the way a wax figure resembles a living person. Technically accurate, but missing something vital. Captain Thomas Mann stood at the crease, bat in hand, staring down a bowler who looked like a marble statue come to life. The alien's form was humanoid, but exaggerated. Long limbs, elongated spine, and a face that seemed carved rather than grown. Its run-up was graceful, almost balletic, but the delivery was wrong. The ball floated, paused mid-air, then dropped like a stone. Thomas let it pass. "That's not swing," he muttered. "That's gravity manipulation." Coach Linda Ryan paced the boundary, arms folded. "They've got the dimensions right, but the rhythm's off. No bounce, no tension." The aliens watched from a raised platform, their robes fluttering in the artificial breeze. One of them, a senior figure named Velen, stepped forward. "We have studied your broadcasts. We replicated the field precisely." Thomas turned to him. "You replicated the geometry, not the game." The team spent the next few days trying to teach cricket from the ground up. They started with basics: grip, stance, fielding positions. The aliens absorbed it all with unnerving precision. They could mimic a cover drive after seeing it once, but they didn't understand why it mattered. "Cricket's not just technique," Thomas explained during a briefing. "It's about patience, pressure, reading the bowler, reading the batter. It's psychological." Velen nodded. "We have studied Earth psychology. Your species is prone to ritualized conflict and emotional projection." Linda raised an eyebrow. "That's one way to describe test cricket." The first match was scheduled for the end of the week. The Thunderbolts would play against a Jalrexian team composed of scholars, tacticians, and ceremonial athletes. The rules were agreed upon, mostly. The aliens insisted on a pre-bowl meditation and a post-over reflection period, which extended the match by several hours. Thomas's team adapted. They learned to bat under a sky with 3 moons. They fielded in low gravity. They bowled with modified wrist action to counter the planet's magnetic drift. But something was missing. After the match, which ended in a draw due to philosophical disagreement over a run-out, Thomas sat with Linda in the observation lounge. "They're brilliant," he said, "but it's like playing against a mirror." No emotion, no instinct. Linda nodded. "They understand the rules, but not the stakes." That night, Thomas wandered the alien city alone. The streets were quiet, lit by bioluminescent stones. He passed temples, libraries, and plazas where Jalrexians practiced slow, deliberate movements, rituals of balance and symmetry. In a small courtyard, he heard a sound, faint, rhythmic, chirping. He followed it to a garden where small, insect-like creatures sang in unison. Not earth crickets, but close. Their song was patterned, deliberate, like a metronome with soul. Thomas smiled. "That's what they're missing." The next morning he brought the team to the garden. "This," he said, "is the sound of cricket. Not the rules, not the pitch. This." The aliens listened. They didn't speak. But something shifted. The next match was different. The field was imperfect. The bounce unpredictable. The aliens made mistakes. They argued. They laughed. It wasn't perfect, but it was cricket. Chapter 3. The League. The invitation arrived in the form of a crystal tablet, delivered by a silent envoy with skin like burnished copper. Coach Linda Ryan read the inscription aloud in the team's quarters. "The Council of Jalrex proposes a multi-species tournament to explore the ritual of cricket. Your presence is requested as founding participants and cultural stewards." Thomas Mann raised an eyebrow. "A galactic league?" Linda nodded slowly. "Looks like it." The council's chamber was vast and solemn, shaped like a spiral amphitheater. Delegates from other planets had arrived, some humanoid, others not. The Glavari were tall and insectoid, with iridescent carapaces and a fondness for symmetry. The Othari resembled floating jellyfish, communicating through pulses of light and scent. The Jalrexians presided, their robes heavier now, their tone more formal. Linda stood before them, flanked by Thomas and Vice Captain Alan Knopf. Cricket is not a weapon. It's not a contest of dominance. It's a game of rhythm, endurance, and respect. Velen, the Jalrexian elder, inclined his head. We understand. But diplomacy requires shared language. Cricket may serve. Alan leaned in. You want to use cricket as a peacekeeping tool? Velen's eyes darkened. We want to understand Earth, and Earth understands cricket. The first interspecies match was scheduled for the following week. The English team would face the Glavari, who had studied cricket obsessively but interpreted it through their own cultural lens. Their bowlers used forearms. Their batters wore ceremonial armor. Their fielders moved in synchronized patterns like a hive. Thomas watched the warm-ups and muttered, "This is going to be weird." Linda was more diplomatic. "It's going to be historic." The match was held in a stadium carved from volcanic glass. Spectators floated, hovered, or perched on crystalline platforms. The rules had been negotiated, some concessions made, some traditions preserved. The first over was chaos. The Glavari bowled with precision but no restraint. Their deliveries spun unpredictably, and their appeals sounded like screeches. Thomas was caught behind by a glove with sensory tendrils. The umpire, a neutral Jalrexian, declared it fair. Linda protested. "That's not a legal catch," Velen responded calmly. It was within the spirit of the game. By the second innings, the English team adapted. Alan Knopf played a steady anchor role, reading the Glavari bowlers like a code. Thomas adjusted his stance to counter the spin. The team began to find rhythm, not just in the game, but in the diplomacy behind it. After the match, which ended in a narrow win for Earth, the Glavari approached with ceremonial gifts, carved bat replicas and a vial of iridescent dust. "You play with honor," their captain said. "We will study your patience." That night, Linda sat alone in the observation lounge, watching the moons rise over the alien skyline. She thought about the game, how it had changed, how it hadn't. Cricket was still cricket, but now it was something more. A language, a bridge, a sound that echoed across worlds. Chapter 4. The Umpire. The third match of the Galactic League was scheduled on a floating platform above the methane lakes of Jalrex's southern hemisphere. The pitch was regulation length, but the outfield shimmered with magnetic interference, and the boundary ropes were replaced with levitating glyphs that pulsed when touched. Thomas Mann adjusted his gloves and glanced at the scoreboard. England was chasing 142 against the Othari, a species of translucent floating beings who communicated through scent and light. Their bowlers didn't run up. They hovered, releasing the ball with a flick of their tendrils, the deliveries bending in ways that defied physics and common sense. But it wasn't the Othari that worried Thomas. It was the umpire. Blore. A sentient fungal entity, Blore resembled a tall, pale stalk with a crown of bioluminescent fronds. It didn't speak. It pulsed. Its decisions were translated by a small orb that hovered beside it, emitting a neutral voice. "Out!" the orb declared after Thomas was struck on the pad by a delivery that had clearly pitched outside leg stump. Thomas turned, stunned. "That's not out. That's not even close." Blore pulsed once. The orb repeated, "O-U-T." Coach Linda Ryan stood from the dugout. "We agreed on DRS. Where's the review?" Velen, seated in the officiating box, responded calmly. "Blore does not require review. It is considered incorruptible." Linda's jaw tightened. So was the ICC. That didn't stop them from botching the 2019 final. The match continued, but the tension grew. Alan Knopf was given out, caught behind, despite no edge. A Glavery batter was allowed to run 6 after the ball ricocheted off 3 fielders and a boundary drone. Every questionable call favored the non-Earth teams. After the match, another draw, this time due to atmospheric ambiguity, the team gathered in their quarters. "They're not playing us," said Thomas. "They're studying us." Linda nodded. "And Blor's the control variable, a neutral umpire with no stake in the outcome, except neutrality doesn't mean infallibility." Alan leaned forward. "Or maybe it's not about fairness. Maybe it's about watching how we respond to unfairness." The next day, Linda requested a private audience with Velin. She spoke carefully. "Cricket is built on trust, on the assumption that the umpire sees what we cannot. If that trust breaks, the game breaks." Velin regarded her in silence. "Blore does not err, but perhaps it does not understand." Linda hesitated. "Then let it learn. Let it play." The following match was experimental. Blore was placed on the field, not as umpire but as a player. It was given a bat, a helmet, and a place at number 11. The result was chaos. Blore refused to run. It refused to swing. It stood at the crease, pulsing gently, absorbing the moment. When bowled at, it simply absorbed the ball into its spongy mass and released it with a wet plop. The crowd, alien and human alike, erupted in laughter. Blore pulsed again, slowly, thoughtfully. After the match, it approached Thomas and extended a tendril. "Thank you," the orb translated. "I understand now. The game is not a code, it is a conversation." From that day forward, Blore remained umpire, but its decisions became more nuanced. It paused, it listened, it even overturned itself once, to the astonishment of all. Cricket, it seemed, had taught even a fungus to reconsider. Chapter 5. The Chorus. It began with a chirp, not on Jalrex, but back on Earth, in a quiet garden in Surrey, where an entomologist named Dr. Patricia Barnes was recording nocturnal insect patterns. She noticed something odd. The crickets had changed their rhythm. The chirps were slower, more deliberate, structured. She ran the audio through a pattern recognition algorithm. The result was inconclusive but suggestive. The crickets were mimicking broadcast signals, specifically the cadence of cricket commentary. Patricia published a short paper. It was dismissed as coincidence, until it happened again. On Jalrex, the English team had begun incorporating ambient sound into their training. Thomas Mann insisted on playing Earthfield recordings during warm-ups, wind through trees, distant traffic, and the soft, familiar chirp of crickets. "It helps," he said. "Keeps us grounded." The Jalrexians noticed. They began studying the sound, analyzing its frequency, its intervals. One scholar proposed that the insects were not merely background noise, but participants in the cultural ritual. Coach Linda Ryan was skeptical. "They're insects. They don't understand cricket." Velin disagreed. "Understanding is not always conscious. Sometimes it is rhythm, sometimes it is presence." Back on Earth, the phenomenon spread. Crickets in different regions began chirping in synchronized patterns. In Kolkata, a swarm gathered near a stadium and chirped in bursts that matched the timing of overs. In Nairobi, a researcher recorded chirps that resembled the Morse code for LBW. The media picked it up. Headlines ranged from "Crickets join the game" to "Insect intelligence or global coincidence." Patricia Barnes was invited to speak at a symposium. She ended her talk with a simple observation. Whether they understand or not, they are part of the soundscape, and the soundscape is part of the game. On Jalrex, the next match began with silence. Then, from the stadium's ambient speakers, a soft chirping filled the air. Not artificial, not simulated. A live transmission from Earth. The players paused. The crowd, alien and human alike, listened. Thomas stepped to the crease. Alan adjusted his gloves. Linda nodded from the dugout. The match began. Afterward, Velen approached Linda. "We have added the crickets to our ceremonial archive. They will be honored as ambient contributors." Linda smiled. "They'd probably prefer a quiet corner and a patch of grass." Velen tilted his head. "We will provide both." The sound of crickets had become more than a metaphor. It was a bridge, a reminder, a rhythm that connected worlds, not through language, but through presence. And somewhere in a garden on Earth, a small insect chirped in time with a game being played light years away. Chapter 6. The Final Over. The final match was held on the edge of Jalrex's upper atmosphere, in a stadium suspended by gravitational anchors above a swirling aurora. The pitch was regulation length, but the outfield shimmered with magnetic haze, and the boundary markers floated like lanterns in low orbit. Thomas Mann stood at the crease, bat in hand, staring down a bowler from the Othari delegation. The alien hovered, its tendrils coiled, its body pulsing with anticipation. The crowd, composed of Jalrexians, Glavari, Othari, and a few Earth diplomats, watched in silence. Coach Linda Ryan paced the dugout, her eyes scanning the scoreboard. England needed 12 runs from the final over. The match had been tense, not just in play, but in tone. Every decision carried diplomatic weight. Every appeal was a test of trust. Blore, the fungal umpire, stood motionless at square leg, its fronds dimmed in concentration. The match had begun with ceremony. Each team presented a symbolic offering. The English brought a hand-carved bat signed by every member of the squad. The Glavari offered a crystal sphere containing their hive's collective memory of the game. The Othari released a cloud of scent that translated to respect through rhythm. Velen, presiding over the event, spoke solemnly. "This is not a contest of supremacy. It is a demonstration of understanding." Linda had replied, "Then let the game speak." The first innings had been slow. The Othari batted with precision but no urgency, scoring in pulses. Their boundaries were calculated, their singles deliberate. England's bowlers adapted, using spin and variation to disrupt the rhythm. Alan Knopf took 2 wickets with deceptive flight. Thomas held the field together with quiet authority. Linda watched from the sidelines, noting every shift in momentum. At the halfway mark, the score was 141. Now, in the final over, the pressure was real. Thomas faced the first ball. It dipped, spun, and clipped his pad. Blore paused, then pulsed. "Not out," the orb declared. Thomas exhaled. The second ball was short. He pulled it hard, 4 runs. The third was wide, 5 to win. The fourth ball was a slower delivery, drifting in the magnetic haze. Thomas stepped forward, drove it cleanly. Another 4. 1 run needed. 2 balls left. The fifth ball was a blur. Thomas missed. The keeper fumbled. Allen, at the non-striker's end, called for a run. Thomas hesitated, then ran. The throw came in fast. Blore pulsed. "Run complete," the orb said. The crowd erupted, not in noise but in light. The stadium shimmered. The aurora flared. The match was over. England had won. After the ceremony, Velen approached Linda. "You have taught us more than technique. You have taught us patience, adaptation, grace under pressure." Linda nodded. "That's cricket." Blore pulsed beside them. "The game is not perfect, but it is honest." Later that night, Thomas sat alone in the observation lounge, watching the aurora drift across the sky. He thought of home, of damp pitches, long shadows, and the quiet tension of a drawn test match. He thought of the sound of crickets, not the game, the insects, the rhythm beneath it all. Chapter 7. The Sound of Home. The descent through Earth's atmosphere was quiet. The Jalrexian vessel, sleek, silent, and nearly invisible to radar, slipped into low orbit and released its passengers over the English countryside. No fanfare, no press, just a soft landing in a field outside Oxford, where dew clung to the grass and the sky was still streaked with morning haze. Thomas Mann stepped out first, his boots sinking into familiar soil. Behind him, Alan Knopf, Coach Linda Ryan, and the rest of the squad emerged, blinking at the pale light. It had been 3 months, or perhaps longer. Time on Jalrex moved differently, measured in lunar tides and ceremonial intervals. But here the rhythm was familiar. The air smelled of damp leaves and distant traffic. A train passed in the distance, and somewhere nearby a cricket chirped. The return was unofficial. The government had been briefed, quietly. The team was debriefed in a secure facility, their accounts recorded, their memories scanned for anomalies. But there was no public statement, no televised reunion. Linda didn't mind. "Let the game speak for itself," she said. Thomas agreed. We weren't abducted. We were invited, and we played. Back in London, the team reconvened at Lord's. The pitch was empty, the stands quiet. Thomas walked the boundary, tracing the line with his fingertips. Alan sat in the pavilion, watching the shadows stretch across the grass. Linda joined them, carrying a small device, a gift from Velin. It emitted a soft, ambient chirping. Not artificial, not simulated. A live transmission from Jalrex. "They've built a garden," she said, "for earth crickets. Imported specimens. They're thriving." Thomas smiled. So the sound of cricket lives on. The next season began with little fanfare. The Thunderbolts were back in domestic play, their interstellar experience whispered about, but never officially acknowledged. But something had changed. Matches were slower, more deliberate. Players paused between overs, reflecting. Umpires listened more carefully. Spectators brought small speakers that played ambient chirping during breaks. It wasn't a revolution. It was a rhythm. One evening, Thomas gave a quiet interview to a local radio station. "What did you learn?" the host asked. Thomas thought for a moment. That cricket isn't just a game. It's a way of listening. To each other. To the moment. To the silence between deliveries. The host chuckled. "And the sound of crickets?" Thomas nodded. "That's the heartbeat of it." In a garden on Jalrex, under 3 moons, a small insect chirped. And on Earth, in a quiet field outside Oxford, another answered. The end. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.